Hi, folks. Today we're going to continue on with our messages on Matthew chapter 24, where we get to hear Jesus' own words about the end times. In verses 1 through 8, if you remember, when asked about his return, Jesus doesn't give a day or an hour, but he does tell us about the pains that will come before that glorious day. He warns us that the opposition will do everything they can to keep others from experiencing the joy of that day by spreading lies about it. He also tells us that wars and conflicts will be widespread the closer we get to that day. He tells us about other hardships that will be present as well. He points to famine and earthquakes as signs of the end times. In verses 9 through 14, we looked at other signs of the end times as well, as Jesus warns about attacks on believers, both physical and spiritual. But he also explains that there is hope for those who stand firm to the end, and that the good news will be spread to the nations. In verses 15 through 21, Jesus talks about the destruction of the temple, the abomination that causes desolation that was prophesied in Daniel and the war against Judea. In verses 22 through 28, Jesus returns to the subject of false messiahs and false prophets and their deception and lies. That leads us to today for verses 29 through 35 in a message entitled Signs of the End Times, the Son of Man. Let's take a look at those verses now. Matthew chapter 24, verses 29 through 35. Immediately after the distress of those days, the sun will be darkened and the moon will not give its light. The stars will fall from the sky and the heavenly bodies will be shaken. Then will appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven. And then all the peoples of the earth will mourn when they see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he will send his angels with a loud trumpet call, and they will gather his elect from the four winds, from one end of the heavens to the other. Now, learn this lesson from the fig tree. As soon as the twig gets tender and the leaves come out, you know that summer is near. Even so, when you see all these things, you know that the end is that it is near, right at the door. Truly I tell you, this generation will certainly not pass away until all these things have happened. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away. So the first thing we see here is that it all begins after this all begins after the birth pains. In verse 29, Jesus says this: immediately after the distress of those days, after all the birth pains that Jesus describes, after all the signs of the end times have occurred, the final event will start to happen. Everything that Jesus talks about will be fulfilled, and the scene will be set for his return. That leads us to the birth pains have already started. Many people are under the assumption that the birth pains have not all started yet, but look at what Jesus tells his disciples in verse 34. Truly I tell you, this generation will certainly not pass away until all these things happened. So Jesus tells his disciples that all these birth pains will start within their generation. So let's go back and see. Matthew chapter 24, verses 1 and 2. Jesus left the temple and was walking away when his disciples came up to him to call his attention to its buildings. Do you see all these things? He asked. Truly I tell you, not one stone here will be left on another. Everyone will be thrown down. So the temple has already been destroyed, and it was done within their generation. Verses 4 and 5, Jesus answered, watch out that no one deceives you, for many will come in my name, claiming, I am the Messiah, and will deceive many. There have already been many false messiahs that date all the way back to their generation. Verses 6 and 7. You will hear of wars and rumors of wars, but see to it that you are not alarmed. Such things must happen, but the end is still to come. Nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There have been numerous wars over the years, but during their generation, Jerusalem and Judea were attacked and faced massive destruction by Rome. It's already happened. Matthew chapter 24, verse 7, and there will be famines and earthquakes in various places. Both have already happened in their generation. Verse 9, and then you will be handed over to be persecuted and put to death, and you will be hated by all nations because of me. Early Christians within their generation faced massive persecution and even death. The disciples faced severe persecution, including imprisonment, torture, and martyrdom for preaching the gospel. James was executed by the sword. Peter was crucified. According to historical accounts, John was the only disciple to die of old age, and even he was exiled to the island of Patmos. Matthew 24:10. At that time, many will turn from their faith and will betray and hate each other, as the early church was persecuted during their generation. There were many that abandoned their faith and betrayed others. Verse 11, and many false prophets will appear and deceive many people. This too happened during their generation and continues as well today. Verse 12, because of the increase of wickedness, the love of most will grow cold. As described by Jesus, that happened in their generation. Verse 14, and this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in the whole world as a testimony to all nations. In Acts 1 through 7, we can read about the message being spread from Jerusalem to Judea. In Acts chapters 8 through 12, we see the gospel spread to Samaria. In Acts chapters 13 through 28, that shows that the message was finally spread to the Gentile world, including Cyprus, Asia Minor, Greece, and Rome. All of these birth pains began and were even present in their generation, and many of these signs still continue today. Jesus says this in today's passage about those signs. Verse 32, now learn this lesson from the fig tree. As soon as its twigs get tender and its leaves come out, you know that summer is near. Even so, when you see all these things, you know that it is near, right at the door. This is a sober reminder that we are indeed on the threshold of his return. The prophecy of Isaiah fulfilled. Look at what Jesus says in today's passage in verse 29. Immediately after the distress of those days, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light, and the stars will fall from the sky, and the heavenly bodies will be shaken. Jesus points back to the words of the prophet Isaiah. Isaiah chapter 13, beginning with verse 4. Listen, a noise on the mountains, like that of a great multitude. Listen, an uproar among the kingdoms, like nations massing together. The Lord Almighty is mustering an army for war. They come from faraway lands, from the ends of the heavens. The Lord and the weapons of his wrath to destroy the whole country. Well, for the day of the Lord is near. It will come like destruction from the Almighty. Because of this, all hands will go limp. Every heart will melt with fear. Terror will seize them. Pain and anguish will grip them. They will writhe like a woman in labor. They will look aghast at each other with faces aflame. See, the day of the Lord is coming, a cruel day with wrath and fierce anger, to make the land desolate and destroy the sinners within it. The stars of heaven and their constellations will not show their light. The rising sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light. I will punish the world for its evil, the wicked for their sins. I will put an end to the arrogance of the haughty, and will humble the pride of the ruthless. I will make people scarcer than pure gold, more rare than the gold of Ophir. Therefore I will make the heavens tremble, and the earth will shake from its place as the wrath of the Lord Almighty in the day of his burning anger. We also find similar wording in another passage in Isaiah chapter 34, beginning with verse 1. Come near, you nations, and listen. Pay attention, you people. Let the earth hear, and all that is in it, the world and all that comes out of it. The Lord is angry with all nations. His wrath is on their armies. He will totally destroy them. He will give them over to slaughter. Their slain will be thrown out. Their bodies will stink. The mountains will soak with their blood. And then listen, all the stars in the sky will be dissolved, and the heavens rolled up like a scroll. All the starry host will fall like withered leaves from the vine, like shriveled figs from the fig tree. Notice the words in verse 4 of that passage and verse 10 of Isaiah chapter 13. Isaiah chapter 13 verse 10 says, the stars of the heavens and their constellations will not show their light. The rising sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light. And then compare that with Isaiah chapter 34 verse 4, where it says, all the stars in the sky will be dissolved, the heavens rolled up like a scroll. All the starry hosts will fall like withered leaves from the vine, like shriveled figs from the fig tree. Compare those with what Jesus says in today's passage in verse 29. Immediately after the distress of those days, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light, and the stars will fall from the sky, and the heavenly bodies will be shaken. Jesus is saying that the words spoken by the prophet Isaiah will be fulfilled at that time. To make sure that they were listening and that they understood this, Jesus adds this in verses 32 and 33 of today's passage. Now learn this lesson from the fig tree. As soon as its twigs get tender and its leaves come out, you know that summer is near. Even so, when you see all these things, you know that it is near, right at the door. Jesus talks about the lesson of the fig tree. Now compare that again with Isaiah chapter 34, verse 4. All the stars in the sky will be dissolved, and the heavens rolled up like a scroll. All the starry host will fall. And then it says, like withered leaves from a vine. And then it says, like shriveled figs from the fig tree. It is hard to understand exactly what will happen in the fulfillment of this prophecy. Some people say different things about that, but it will not go unnoticed because of its massive impact on the heavens. Verse 29, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light, and the stars will fall from the sky, and the heavenly bodies will be shaken. As it all begins, this too will come to pass. And that's what Jesus was saying here, that the prophet Isaiah's prophecies would come to fulfillment. the Son of Man. Jesus finally gets to the event that we all look forward to as believers. After all the birth pains, that glorious moment of his return will occur. After the prophecy in Isaiah is fulfilled, this will happen. Verses 30 and 31. And then will appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven. And then all the peoples of the earth will mourn when they see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he will send his angels with a loud trumpet call, and they will gather his elect from the four winds, from one end of the heavens to the other. You see, the final sign will be the sign of the Son of Man in heaven. At that point, the long-awaited return of Jesus will occur. Jesus points back again to the prophecy of the Old Testament. And look at what it says in the words of Daniel chapter 7, verses 13 and 14. He says, "In my vision at night I looked, and there before me was one like a son of man coming with the clouds of heaven. He approached the Ancient of Days and was led into his presence. And he was given authority, glory, and sovereign power. All nations and the people of every nation, every language, worshipped him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion that will not pass away, and his kingdom is one that will never be destroyed." As Jesus said earlier in verse 27 of Matthew chapter 24, his return will be noticed by all the world. Verse 24, it says, "For his lightning comes from the east and is visible even in the west, so will be the coming of the Son of Man." There will be no doubt about it when it happens. In verse 31, Jesus says this, "And he will send his angels with a loud trumpet call. His arrival will show him for who he is." Jesus says this in verse 30, that he will be coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. The gathering of the believers. As we've said before, for the believers, we look forward to that glorious day. Jesus will return in glory and power. After living through all those birth pains, the suffering will finally be over for us. Our Savior will return to us. Look at what Jesus says in verse 31. "And he will send his angels with a loud trumpet call, and they will gather his elect from the four winds, from one end of the heavens to the other." What a day that will be for the believers. The impact on the rest of the world. For those who don't believe, things will be very different than they are for the Christians. In verse 30, Jesus says this, "And then will appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and then all the peoples of the earth will mourn when they see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with great power and great glory." Lacking a true belief in Jesus as their Lord and Savior, they will not be gathered up. There will be no joy for them at that moment, realizing that they had missed the opportunity and sensing the dread of the moment. Jesus says that they will mourn that moment. Jesus will go on to say more about that day in the rest of this chapter, and we'll look at that in our next message, Jesus tells us about the end times and his return. It will begin after those birth pains. Those birth pains have already started and were present during the subsequent generation of the disciples, directly impacting all of them. The prophecy of Isaiah, particularly in chapters 13 and 24, will be fulfilled. The sign of the Son of Man will be the final sign, and there will be a gathering of all the believers. But the rest of the world will mourn at that time. I look forward to the day of his return, and so should you. Times will be troubling until that day, but rest assured that you will get to spend eternity with our precious Savior and Lord. I love you all. I miss you all. May God bless each and every one of you, and please pray for our country. I love you all. May God bless.